Energy security is a real problem around the world. Countries go to war over energy security. But when does a state become a security risk? I'm about to talk to Ronald Stein. He is the author of Clean Energy Exploitations, helping citizens understand the environmental and humanitarian abuses that support clean energy. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and I'm so thrilled to have Ronald stop by the podcast. Thank you, Ronald.
Stu, glad to be aboard.
I'll tell you what, this is our second podcast, and I've also interviewed Todd, who is a co-author of that book, and I'm going to have him back on. That podcast has gone nuts too. So you're out there, Ronald. Your stories are getting out there.
Energy literacy is my passion to get people to be able to talk about it at the dinner table.
Well, let's just jump right on into this. Why were you making those comments about a state being a security risk?
Well, when you take a look at California, we have 140 airports. We're a big state. Now, of those 140 airports, they're consuming about 13 billion gallons of aviation fuel a year. And of those airports, we have 9 international airports up and down the state. We have 41 military airports up and down the state. And 3 of the largest ports, busiest ports in the country, are on the West Coast.
Wow.
And we have, in 95, we were pretty much independent. We had enough oil production in California and oil production out of Alaska. We provided like 95% of our needs to meet that materialistic and fuel requirements. Well, all the governors since 95 had been on a campaign to reduce in-state oil production. So that in-state oil production was once dependent on foreign countries for 5% of our oil. Today, it's more than 75%.
Mm-hmm.
We're dependent on foreign countries for 75% of our fuel needs to operate the international airports, the military airports, and 3 of the largest shipping ports in the country. And, it's a no-brainer. Even the educated can see, you basically attack those ports, and a lot of products come through here for the rest of the country. And the rest of the country is vulnerable to California's dependency.
Well, Ronald, this is energy hypocrisy at its finest. And when we sit back and think, at its finest, I mean, you're going to have to give it an award over here for, oh, by the way, and the Oscar goes to, California. And this is horrific, especially if you think about our military. Those bases, that number of bases just made me airsick thinking about this, Ronald.
Well, in a way, it's not surprising because go to the national level. Biden has a lot of generals report to him. Mm-hmm. Army, Navy, military, Marines, the space program. Not one general, because Biden's on the same campaign. He wants to eliminate oil and use wind and solar to run the country. And not one general has asked Biden the question, how are we going to run our military without fuel and without products to support the troops?
Yeah.
And like I say, it's at the national level, and there's no conversations. And it's, like I say, it's horrific. And, it's obvious. Maybe they just don't want to mess up their retirement plans. I'm not sure.
It seems a little bit odd that you and I can sit here and talk about this obvious, but is it a culture or religion, Ronald, that your passion is energy literacy and going out and trying to do that? How do you try to go against a religion? You can't, can you?
It's tough. Like I say, when I give a presentation, I do not like to give a presentation as much as have a fireside chat.
Okay.
And most people are embarrassed to ask an intelligent question about energy. It's because energy can get pretty complicated pretty quick. And all the books I've written with Todd Royal is in layman's terms, because no complicated formulas or graphs for people to comprehend, because not everybody's an engineer. In fact, some engineers can't even understand the graphs and formulas. And so we try and keep it in layman's terms and, you know, simplicity. And the people that have the microphone, all they do is speak in the microphone, and the press only transcribes what they say. If they say we're jumping out of the airplane without a parachute, that's what you read in the paper.
Right.
But, you know, let's have a discussion. Is there a backup plan? I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of crude oil if there's a backup plan.
Right.
You know, right now we get electricity from numerous sources, you know, from natural gas, coal, nuclear, hydroelectric, wind, solar. But all they do is generate electricity. They manufacture nothing for society. Because you take crude oil, for example. Crude oil is totally useless. All this black tar, unless you can refine it into something usable.
Right.
And we've developed technology, you know, through the refineries. We get a lot of different fuels for cars and trucks and ships and airplanes and the space program, and a lot of petrochemicals that makes thousands of products in our materialistic society. This conversation would end if we didn't have, you know, iPads and iPhones and that type of thing. And everything in our society is made from those petrochemicals. In fact, if you take a look at all the systems that can generate electricity, wind, solar, nuclear, hydro, you know, natural gas, all the components to generate electricity are made with the petrochemicals manufactured from crude oil. So you get rid of crude oil and there's no electricity.
Nope.
And there's no electric vehicles. I mean, everything goes away.
Right.
And so we have, like I say, we're a very materialistic society. We've just taken this stuff for granted. And, you know, of the 8 billion people on the planet, the wealthy countries are driving the green movement, not recognizing the fact that of those 8 billion people, more than 80%, which is more than 6 billion people, they're living on less than $10 a day.
And that breaks my heart, Ronald. I mean, and
you're right. They haven't joined the Industrial Revolution yet. And we're making things harder and harder for them to afford. And right now they got nothing to lose because they got nothing to lose, you know?
Right.
But will they ever come out of their poverty of, you know, burning cow dung for heat and that type of thing? I don't know. It'd be nice to have them live the same kind of lifestyle, you know, we're living, because we just take it for granted. And but the wealthy countries, you know, have this passion that we're going to go green, but wind and solar can only generate electricity and manufacture nothing for society. I think the biggest problem in politics is they talk about the word energy.
Right.
They really should not talk about the word energy. You're either talking electricity or products. What do you want?
Oh, right.
Because, you know, wind and solar can only produce electricity. Oil, on the other hand, is never used to generate electricity. Natural gas is, coal is, but oil.
There are some oil burning, and they are not very good at it, but they do burn oil.
That's why they're not. Yeah, when you take a look at the pie chart, oil is almost non-existent. In fact, oil is generating less electricity than wind and solar. And wind and solar don't generate much to begin with, you know. So, but yeah, oil is primarily used for our materialistic petrochemicals and the fuels for the various transportation systems we have.
You bet.
You know, when you take a look, you know, when I fly, you know, before I get on the airplane, I take a step back and I look at that sucker and say, "Holy crap! You're going to get this off the ground." Or if you take a cruise, take a look at that ship, bigger than a hotel. Right. And you want this thing to move, you know? And so, right, it's amazing that they basically say that we're going to change our energy requirements from fossil fuels to wind and solar.
Right.
But Stu, they do different things. Wind and solar can only generate electricity. They can manufacture nothing for society. Electricity can charge your iPhone,
Right.
but it can't make the iPhone.
It really can't. I
It
mean,
can make the defibrillator in the hospital work, but it can't make the defibrillator.
wow.
And
And
all the infrastructures we have today didn't exist 200 years ago. There was no medical industry 200 years ago. There was no transportation industry 200 years ago. There was no electronics. I mean, everything is changed in the last 200 years since we discovered oil. And since we discovered oil, the light bulb came into reality.
right.
By the way, the light bulb is made from fossil fuel products. So, and now we have all these electrical generating system options, but all the components are coming from manufactured crude oil.
Right. So, what do you see as the biggest hurdle to get people's attention? Because right now we have the societally thing going on out there where people are taking glue, which is made from oil,
Right.
sticking it to the pavement, and then waiting to get run over or their hand cut off because they've glued. That was really sad, those folks that got their hand cut off because they couldn't get the glue off. But how do we get to that generation, or how do we combat, if you would, because we're in a war now. We are
Yes.
in a war. Where do we go from here?
There's got to be conversations. That's the one thing we're not having, because all the policies are being dictated by politicians, the ESG movement, the bank boardrooms are setting policies.
Right.
But there's got to be discussions. Like you say, I'm all in favor of getting rid of crude oil, but what's your backup plan? How are you going to build your iPhones and keep the electronics going? And it's amazing how many pieces that just become commonplace and accepted as
You've lived
standard.
in California a long time, and you've seen a lot of changes.
Yes.
And is California changing to something you wouldn't even recognize?
Well, it's changing, but I'm not sure it's changing for the better. Like you say, inflation, you're raising the cost of electricity and cost of fuel and the cost of products.
Right.
And you see everybody going on strike. The movie industry has been on strike. The UAW has been on strike because, they can't afford the cost of
Right.
living. When cost of electricity and cost of fuel goes up, it drives up the cost of bananas and the cost of, fruit. And I mean,
Right.
it's just amazing. And everybody wants a bigger wage rate. And so inflation is just going nuts. The homeless population in California is exploding,
Right.
because most people tend to live paycheck to paycheck, and if you lose
Yep.
your job and you're out of a job, you're probably one paycheck away from being homeless.
Well,
And if you're
Mark,
homeless, that
yeah,
train's going at warp speed. You'll never get back on the train.
I never even noticed that there was a writer's strike. I didn't. I could care less, to be honest, because I don't watch them. So that sounds awful, but I'm like,
Yeah, they've been on
that
strike for almost 3 months, and you just settled the other day.
I I didn't even know. I heard that and that there it's over, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know they were
But
going on.
hospitals are going on strike. I mean, everybody wants to raise, but and it just snowballs because if you give a person a raise to $25 an hour as a minimum
Right.
wage, well, the price of the hamburger went up, and
Did
it
I
just
see
goes.
that? Did I see that somebody was paying an $18 Big Mac the other day in California? That I did see.
Okay, I'm not sure
Somebody,
about the Big Mac. I'm not sure the Big Mac went that high, but
that's crazy in California. How much are you paying for gas right now, Ronald?
I paid $6.50 the other day.
650.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That
the interesting thing for the people that are, I want to say, well off, they don't see any problems because I paid $6.50. For
right.
people that are marginally surviving,
Right.
that'll kill
If
them.
you're out
And
working for a living, Ronald, that'll kill you.
Yeah. And, you take EVs in California. The elites have bought them. The elites will continue to buy them. But Stu, we're running out of elites. Now we're getting down to the common folk. And the common folk aren't going to buy into this. And, they need a workhorse vehicle. I looked at the 25 most popular vehicles in the country,
Right.
and the Ford 150 is at the top. And there's a couple trucks, on top. And then you get down to SUVs, but very few people want a small sedan. The
Right.
Tesla is a small sedan
Right.
because you need space for your strollers and your skateboards and your bikes. And so they need a lot of, and like I say, the bigger the vehicle, the bigger the battery, the bigger the price. And
And the more
it's crazy.
and the more slaves that the kids have to be in the Congo. Did you hear about the new truck that was just announced by Ram that has got the V6 in it to charge the batteries? Did you hear that one?
I haven't, not yet.
It just came out, and Ronald, this is a so you've got a truck, and it's coming out in 2025, I think, is when they announced that it'll be ready. The old World War II submarines were diesel powered, but the diesel charged the batteries, and then the electric batteries drove the propeller. This is the same setup. You got a V6 sitting in an EV truck, and that V6 is only there to charge those batteries. I kid you not.
Well, that may change. Let me explain, because as an engineer, I thought the hybrid was phenomenal.
I
You
love it.
double your gas mileage, and you buy hundreds of years to develop battery technology. But the auto industry has been mandated to get their emissions down so low for the entire fleet of vehicles,
Right.
all the vehicles they manufacture. The only way they can get down to that low number is they have to eliminate the gas engine in the hybrid. So in the coming years, you're going to see a couple hybrids if it fits into their calculation, but most manufacturers are 100% EVs. They can't make a hybrid if they want to meet the low emission requirements
Well,
of their entire fleet.
this new Ram would qualify as an EV with a gas generator supplement. So they're saying that it only has a 120-mile range on the batteries, but you get 900 miles when you consider uh, the generation capability of the gas charging the batteries. I don't know how that's going to play in.
Well, once the regulators get notice that they're still producing emissions, they'll put a clamp on that. So, it's interesting. The Tesla has 1,000-pound battery.
Right.
The 18-wheelers have, I think, an 8,000-pound battery with limited range. And it's, like I say, it's going to be devastating. We're going to become, the national security risk for America, not because of, the crude oil we're importing, but because the trucks aren't going to want to come back and forth to California. And so I'm not sure how the products are going to get delivered to the Americans.
Didn't California ban fossil fuel trucks after a certain year? I think
I followed the cars. I mean, by 2035, you cannot purchase a gasoline car here.
right. And they were trying to ban the trucks coming in as well too, and I don't know if that had passed yet or not.
I'm not sure on that one. Yeah.
And if they did, Ron, how are you going to get your groceries? How are you going to get your food? And that one I'm going to go check, but I think that it's either close to passing or they were about to pass it. Can you imagine getting rid of any kind of trucks, any diesel?
Well, like I say, we have got a lot of product come through all the ports on the West Coast.
Right.
Like I say, I identified the three, which is LA, Oakland, and Long Beach. They are the three busiest ports in the country. And there's a lot of other ports up and down the coast. And a lot of product comes in there for all Americans. And they get to Americans by truck, by train.
Right.
And, like I say, we're we're a transportation hub here.
Last time
California,
I checked, Ron, both of those run on diesel.
duh.
We and I get really tickled at this whole thing, and then I just saw a poll come out that's saying that now there's some people not happy with the way Newsom's running California, and I'm like, is the media starting to turn on him? That's the first time I've ever seen a negative poll come out against Newsom. I don't know what was going on with that one. That was kind of like,
Yeah, he is a clown all by himself,
I
Yeah, like I say,
love that.
they're just set up to go green at any cost. And like I say, it's affecting, we have almost 40 million people living here in California.
Right.
And, like I say, the elites, like I say, they're very influential in setting policies.
Right.
And, but like I say, the people that are just barely making it, they're the ones that are suffering and
Wow.
will continue to suffer.
California and New York are losing population left and right, and they're losing a lot of the upper echelon are moving out of New York. New York is just devastated tax wise.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of taxes here. I did see a cartoon which was kind of comical that the exodus out of California is slowing down. You know why?
uh,
People can't afford the fuel for the U-Hauls.
Along that same joke, Ronald, I got really tickled. Somebody told me the other day you can get a U-Haul out of California for $2,000, but they will pay you to haul it back.
Right.
If you go from California to Texas in with a trailer, it's $2,000, but they will pay you that $4,000 to get it back, whatever the number was. I think it's
Yeah,
pretty funny.
it's supply and demand. Like I say, we have the supply. The rest of the country has a demand for our people, and yeah, there's no demand to bring those U-Hauls back here,
No.
so you got to pay to bring them back.
Oh yeah, it's like, but I hope they leave their voting preferences. Last night, Austin, Texas had a riot, and I'm like, would you all please just leave all of your voting practices in California, please? If you're going to come to Texas, please leave your voting practices there. So, well, what are you seeing coming around the corner for these car dealers? If they are going to be regulated into death, and they're just going to like sit here, what is the way? Is there any hope that they're going to survive, or are they going to be bailed out? Because, if they are being forced into this emission problem, Ronald, are they between a rock and a hard place?
They are definitely between a rock and a hard place. And once you're sold to all the elites, it's the rest of the people. Most people don't buy new cars; they buy used cars.
Right.
And there's no used car market in the EV sector.
No.
For a couple of reasons. One is the technology is changing so fast, and B, if the battery conks out and you got to replace it, that could be a $10,000 to $20,000 expense. And
now, how
yeah,
much? I think it was you or Todd when we were talking. A battery loses every time you charge it and then discharge it. It loses a little bit of its capability, and so after a while, again, you degrade. That battery degrades over time, and
oh yeah,
so
that's the same thing. I mean, like your flashlight battery. Sometimes those batteries are rechargeable, but yeah, they definitely degrade each time, and over time they're going to need to be replaced. And
and
right
the,
now we have no good proven way to recycle batteries. We have no proven way to recycle wind turbines, no proven way to recycle solar panels. And so we're just going all in to generate electricity, and we're forgetting about the fact that we're a materialistic society that lives off of products. And no matter what kind of electricity you have, hydro, nuclear, they're not generating any products.
No. Um, what do you see coming around the corner for California when we're talking about energy? I mean, is there any way that you're going to be able to get, because Diablo Canyon has got a new life. You know, they've
Only because Newsom was going to be losing votes and he saw a hot summer coming along. So he
yep.
gave it a life extension of another year or so. But
That
yeah,
would,
it's on the chopping blocks.
but they're not gonna. It's not gonna. It provides, was it 10% of California's power or something? Whatever
Yeah,
number it is, it's a
it's a
bunch.
bunch. Yeah,
Uh,
and
how
the
what
thing
happens
with
when
wind
that
and
goes?
solar, well, wind and solar, all they do is provide occasional electricity. And the thing that's really aggravating, they get subsidies based on their nameplate rating. They never generate their nameplate rating. They're down
Man,
most of the time because the wind doesn't blow all the time and sun doesn't shine all the time. Whereas the other power plants, be it hydro, nuclear, natural gas, coal, they're continuous, uninterruptible electricity. And hospitals and communication systems need continuous electricity. If you're on the operating table, you don't want to have that power supplied by wind and solar.
no. You know, I'm just sitting here kind of think it's kind of funny when we sit back and kind of think getting to the next generation kids is critical. And then that's, we're trying to do that. And all of my discussions, we're trying to get geared up for testing and homeschool and those kind of things. We need to make your books mandatory reading for high school kids. I think that would be the first step that we would make a very good
Well,
deal.
that plus having discussions because when Todd Rowe and I wrote Clean Energy Exploitations, we learned in detail where the lithium and cobalt is coming from to build these batteries and to build wind turbines and solar panels. And Stu, I mean, I've made after writing the book, I made a personal decision. I would never buy an EV because of ethical reasons.
Yep.
I know where the lithium's coming from and
Right.
I'm not willing to financially support that. You've heard of blood diamonds. These are blood minerals.
That's right.
And our government wants to go green so badly, they're providing subsidies and tax incentives. They're providing financial incentives for China and Africa. Continue exploiting those people. Continue the environmental degradation of your land. We
Right.
can't see it. It's over there. And it's atrocious. And California, with its green movement, the term in some of the environmental laws is we're not supposed to leak emissions somewhere else. We're not going to refine it here. It's okay to refine it over there because they have no environmental controls. In fact, I joke with people that our governor Newsom only breathes California air. Anything outside the borders of California, he doesn't breathe it. So he's cleaning up California, but he's increasing emissions around the world.
Right.
He doesn't breathe those emissions. He only breathes California air.
That man should never dive into the ocean. If he does, he will create an oil slick larger than the Exxon Valdez with as much oil as is in it.
Well, I joke if he ever is successful in getting rid of oil, he won't be able to buy the grease for his hairstyles.
So that goes back to those commercials with Dawn where they're cleaning the penguin with all the oil all
Right,
over it and
right.
everything else. That penguin went swimming next to Governor Newsom. So we're this is a serious subject that we're laughing about. And it's your energy security is really critical and how we think about this, because we also Ronald, need to think
Well,
about
let me clarify. When you talk about energy security, we're talking about electricity security or product security.
both.
Because when the
There is,
politicians talk energy, they're talking, we're going to go wind and solar without oil.
I
But you
yeah,
can't do that.
I love the way you're phrasing that, but energy security to me, and I like the way we're looking at this, and I need help talking about this way. But energy security to me means product and electricity. So if we're talking, and because you don't go to the farm, you don't get your groceries without oil and gas. Those groceries don't get here. Now, I don't care if a wind farm is sitting there. However, the wind farm doesn't hold you. It is not sustainable from day one. That wind farm is not fiscally sustainable. So, and I love the way you say that. Energy security is it product or electricity? And I think energy means both.
Right.
But
you and I and several others are the minority that think that way. But
right,
politicians, they say, well, renewable energy is going to replace fossil fuels
right.
because they don't have the same understanding. And
No, you can't grow food with a wind farm.
uh,
And then Germany just had to close their BSAF plant 4 months ago. There because they didn't have any natural gas. You need natural gas in order to make fertilizer. So
the thing that is no one's paying attention to is the fact that, yeah, we have a fossil fuel problem here in California because we keep importing crude oil, and the crude oil is feeding the refineries. Well, there's pressure to shut down these refineries, and two of the largest refineries are pretty much maybe have a couple years left because of the Air Quality Management District wants
right,
them to reduce their particular emissions, which is going to cost each of them like $1 billion or more each. And they
right.
both have says, we're out of here. If it holds up in court, it's being challenged in court, then two refineries close down. On the outside, there are, we keep hearing about refineries closing because there's 700 refineries in the entire world. And in the next 5 years, because of age and the pressure of go green, about 20% are projected to close. That's 140 refineries
Out of
closing
the 700.
out
Wow.
of the seven. And that's 140 manufacturers that are manufacturing fuels and petrochemicals for our materialistic society.
Right.
You don't read about the fact they're building 88 new ones in Asia.
In Asia. Yes.
Yeah, Asia. Yeah. So these 88 new refineries, China and Russia, they're war historians. They know the country that controls oil, natural gas, and minerals controls the world
Period.
because, Hitler didn't control any of that and he lost. And it's interesting that, Russia and China, they're going all in because it's a materialistic society and they got nothing to replace it. So these 88 refineries are going to be making fuels and petrochemicals. And if we stop importing crude oil, we'll be importing the finished product from China.
At a higher price.
Exactly. And, like I say, they have the supply, we got the demand. And we're not in a negotiating position.
And
Just like the trucks that are taking people in and out of California.
and the hypocrisy part of this, Ronald, is the fact that the U.S. Energy sector does it better than anybody else the oil and gas sector does it better than anybody else on the planet. And by your point of those other new 88 refineries going into Asia, going into China, we're going to be having buying from Russian oil or Iran oil going to China.
Right.
And then that China is going to refine it. And then it's going to come over here. Our adversaries, Venezuela, Iran, and Russia, are going to go to China. They're going to refine it. And then it's going to come rolling over to the U.S. Do you know how much pollution just happened by this conversation?
Exactly. Right. They don't have the same environmental controls we do.
No.
And again, you're just accentuating the fact that it's a national security risk to go in that direction. To support our materialistic society, we either, manufactured here or somewhere else. And somewhere else is greater emissions to the world.
This is absolutely frightening, Ronald. I mean, when you
It
sit
is.
back and think about this amount of hanging your backside out, you're exposed. I mean, this is kind of like, you and I would know what this is. Those onesies that we used to have, with the flannel onesies with the buttons in the back. I had
Yes.
that. Okay, I know. I like me some flannels because it. My dad did not have an indoor plumbing until he was 16. So yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, I get cold during the winter, and I know what them buttons are in the back of your flannels, you know, so that kids don't understand having to rough it, and it's gonna get that way.
You know, I joke about if we do get rid of crude oil, you've heard about the unfunded pension liabilities. You know, people are retiring and then they're, drawing off their retirement for, 40, 50 years.
Right.
That problem goes away instantaneously if you get rid of oil because no one's going to live past 40.
They're all gonna be dead. Yeah. There you go.
And the homeless population goes away because all the tents and sleeping bags are made with oil. So there'd be nothing for them.
All right, you're a sick man, Ronald. That was actually funny. That was very, very sick and very funny. But
it's
just get rid of oil and everybody dies and the world's all solved.
We're back to the 1800s. It's, the 1800s, there was no oil, there was no electricity. Life was hard, life was short. And like I say, it's, the confusion about when the politicians say, well, wind and solar energy is going to replace oil. Ain't going to happen, Stu. No.
My granddad came in on a wagon, covered wagon into Oklahoma. And that tells you I'm not that far from not having electricity. And so the kids now, if the grid goes down, because Todd was phenomenal with the talking about supply chain, and he's a freak. I mean, that man, I could see why he enjoyed writing a book. But when we sit back and think about if there's a problem on the grid, it's going to be years before it comes back. And what gets me all worked up is people don't understand that we are not prepared for any kind of a burp. I mean, it can be a sun. Let's just say, oh, a sun block. There was one in 1905, I think, or something, a sunburst that happened back then, an EMP burst from the sun. It would take out the United States.
Yep. Electricity is very, very vulnerable. And, they keep talking about offshore wind. Well, offshore wind affects the east and the west coast for electricity. North Dakota is not going to benefit from offshore wind turbines.
No, I think that is really bad. Now, what is your next book, Ronald?
There's so many different subjects. I keep talking about the the wind and solar, the nameplate farce. They get subsidies based on nameplate, and it's a great nameplate, but if the wind doesn't blow, I can put a wind turbine up in anywhere in Alaska, and it'd be snow burden, but it's got a nameplate rating. Don't know. There's so many different ways to go, and I've been involved in so many podcasts like this, trying to provide energy literacy. Like I say, when I give a presentation, I like to provide like 50 open-ended questions to the moderator and to the audience.
Right.
Because I want to talk about what they want to talk about. You want to talk about EVs, wind, solar, oil, whatever. And so these are all open-ended questions. And so they could stand up and ask an intelligent question or, modify it, but gives them something to start from, because their question will generate an answer from me and hopefully generate more questions from them. But it's got to be a conversation. And right now you get guys, like Biden and Newsom, they're just speaking in the microphone. And Greta Thunberg, speaks in a microphone, and
Yeah.
she lives in this materialistic world that cannot exist with wind and solar by itself.
No.
And so it's there's got to be conversations. And if I'm striving, all my opt-out articles are in layman's terms because I would like people to talk about it at the dinner table.
Right.
And so when it comes time to vote on a new proposition, that's being prepared in a bank boardroom,
Right.
hey folks, let's talk about it. I'm all for jumping out of the airplane, but I'd like something that's going to be a replacement for the parachute. And by the way, the parachute's made out of oil.
Yeah, we just don't have enough silkworms. I mean, it would take 2 or 3 years to make a half a parachute.
Well,
So, but I'll tell you what, Ron, thank you so much for stopping by again, the podcast. And I'll tell you what, we're going to have all your show notes again in there, and your book information and Todd's information will be in there and embedded into the show notes. So
fantastic.
always, Ron. And I'm sure I will talk to you again as soon as we hear another one of your articles come across that screams for a podcast.
Fantastic, Stu. Yeah, just promote some conversations
Absolutely.
at the dinner table. It's people have to understand. There's good and there's bad. If you want to do this, what's the repercussions of doing that?
Right.
And
Hey, have a great one. We'll see you next time.